you do have to invest in yourself. And it's not being selfish. It doesn't take away from anything else.
What can we do as women to actually thrive at work and not just, survive?
The sort of idea that we've got to hit this perfect thriving moment where we're hitting it out the park on all things at all times. And that's a lot of pressure for women.
We look at men for potential, but we judge women based on performance. Do you think that comment would have been delivered to a man doing the same thing?
I suspect not. I suspect perceptions of women can be much, much more critical.
Welcome to Raw with Uma, and I'm Uma, your host and architect of Raw Leadership, here to bring you unfiltered, unrehearsed, unscripted conversations with women about what really goes on in navigating life and work. Are you ready? Let's get raw. My guest today is dialing in from Australia. Welcome, Shan Wen.
Thank you, Uma.
And which part of Australia am I speaking to you today?
Oh, I'm based in Sydney, the most beautiful city.
Of course, I miss coming to Sydney. So, Shan Wen, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you wanted to come on the show.
Yeah, sure. So I am currently not working because I have decided to have a career break. But I've just finished a long term with one of the most wonderful work you used to work as well at VMware. I have just won recently in March as the Women in Leadership Mentorship Award in the industry. So it's been a very wonderful journey. And the reason why I'm here today, Uma, is I know you have done so much incredible work in the Asia Pacific region. And I always admire you from afar, even we're not working, in the same region, because I'm in Australia and you based in Singapore. But I should, take the opportunity to ask you a few questions, if you don't mind.
Of course, yeah. And I think that's the downside of working for big companies is you never get to meet everyone that works in it. So here we are meeting online.
That's right.
Outside of VMware. But welcome to the show. Congratulations on your award. So let's get to your questions.
Yes, sure. So through my mentorship program that I initiated and expanded in Asia Pacific region at VMware, I come across many female leaders as well as my colleagues, and who are saying they feel like, majority of them, sometimes they feel a bit, deflated and not as motivated. I feel like more of, survival through the day because the overwhelming, workload and all the challenges, and feel like they are on, going through things as if they're on a thread, rather than, thriving, they're surviving. So my question to you, Uma, is what can we do as women to actually thrive at work and not just, survive?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think thrive is such a beautiful word because it means that you are showing up as your best self. It means you are in an environment that recognizes your gifts and is able to use it. It, speaks to so many positive experiences that you can give and take in that work environment, which unfortunately I think is quite rare, but not impossible to find. I would say that for women in the workplace, my experience, and I'd love to hear your story on what, you have been thinking about in order to thrive before and to thrive forward, is there's two things. I think the first thing is the power of circles. I have personally, and it's why I built the nonprofit company in Singapore, Lean in the power of peer-to-peer mentorship. I say that in circles, women can come together and be unapologetically messy, ambitious, and fabulous. It's very different to having a circle of friends because your friends think that you are the best thing in the world. And sometimes they may not tell you what you need to hear, but in a circle, it comes without a friendship tax. So I think circles are the most powerful thing a woman can do for her career. She does need, as I did and I do still, that peer-to-peer mentors that I can relay anything that I want to unapologetically, be completely vulnerable, not be judged for it, and get real mirror in the face advice. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, in order to thrive, you got to deliver your best work. And delivering your best work does mean that you have to think about the skills that allow you to deliver that best work. And that's a combination of soft skills and hard skills. And I think for women, the difference is, for example, when you walk into a room, how do you own a room? That's a skill. How do you communicate with confidence? How do you navigate power and politics? How do you negotiate without being penalized? How do you seek that sponsor? Even asking for anything is quite hard for most women. So I think thinking through those skills are super important, the soft and hard skills. The hard skills are the non-negotiables that you need to deliver your work. So if you are an engineer and you're an AI engineer, there's going to be a set of technical certifications, know-hows that you need to gather to do that best work. And then the soft skills I just talked about. And I think the third thing is, are you in an inclusive environment for you to thrive? Are you also bringing inclusivity to those around you? Because it works both ways. And I like to say you have to be consciously including, otherwise you are unconsciously excluding. So what does that look like for you? And how would you show up if that was your mantra, right? So if you think about your own experience, Shan Wen, those are the three things that come to mind when you ask me that question. Any of that resonate with you?
Oh, absolutely. All of them. I feel some are external, some are internal. Things that we can control and things we cannot, but we can definitely influence and impact. So that's well said, Oma. I definitely agree with that.
Thank you.
For me, myself, I think I can resonate even a bit more based on, your three principles being, part of a powerful, supportive circle. I found sometimes it's a bit challenging at your own, organization, because that might be, conflict of interest, for example. There can be issues you want to find some mentor to give you advice, but there might be sensitivity in there. Let's, figure out something that even without, being within the same team, without talking to your manager, maybe we can reach out to someone external who has been in a similar kind of position, who have that resource, or even within organization, but different department, that might be helpful.
I have always found the peers to my boss to be great mentors. So not necessarily in your chain of command. So yeah, I love that tip, because I think when your early career, mentors are important and you might have a couple of them. But as you progress and get to mid-career, the board of mentors become even more important.
So Uma, I also like your second point made on skills that covers both qualifications, capabilities, as well as soft skills. Now, I can definitely resonate to that because I'm kind of like a curious, ongoing lifetime learner. Each year, I'll assign myself to learn something new. That's just me. But also, I feel it is very important. We always need to invest in ourselves. There are so many commitment, things we are responsible for in life, but we should never stop investing in ourselves to become a better version each year. So I guess if anything I could add to your second point would be always invest, in yourself along the way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Just building that identity that is not tied to your job requires you to invest in yourself so that, you're just portable in anything that you want to do. And I think women find it hard, generally speaking. I certainly found it hard to think about investing in myself because we're so much of natural givers, right? We're busy taking care of the people around us. If you are a mother, your children becomes priority. If you're taking care of your parents, right? Here in Asia, we live in multi-generational homes. So we're so busy caring that we tend to put ourselves last. So I think that's such an important message that you're saying there, in that you do have to invest in yourself. And it's not being selfish. It doesn't take away from anything else. And in fact, I think you send a message to your tribe and your people around you when you do invest in yourself.
Absolutely. I feel like there is a confusion that people, especially women, because they're so caring and loving, and that's just part of our nature, that they sometimes confuse the, being selfish versus being self-care. I think to find that right balance across different things important in life is very crucial to be successful and be happy and content with your own life. And you also made a third point, and I think, the inclusiveness, the diversity. I think many companies, and even at the government level, at, more advanced countries, if they have the capacity, they will invest hugely to support women going back to workplace, to having, the gender parity to support, for example, the, parent leave, that even, having the father being able to have that leave is also actually contributing for, the wives to go back to work. Like there was some shocking numbers I've noticed just over the COVID. So many people, especially women, go back to family life because, COVID, that they have to sacrifice their career, their jobs to look after the young toddler and kids. So I feel like, that's definitely somewhere that's external, but we can, raise our voice. So what are your view on that, Uma, as a business entrepreneur, as well as a very strong leader in the region? What do you view on that? How we can get support?
Yeah, I always think about what we can all do to create that environment that, everyone can take away as something tangible that they can action immediately. And I think about, for example, if you are working in a team of people that, let's say there's a great mix of men, women, and others, right? Imagine if half of that team went up to the managers and said, beyond 5:00, we're not going to have any networking event because the rest of our team will not be able to participate because they're caregivers and they need to get home, right? Regardless of gender. I'm pretty sure that manager, hopefully someone who's smart enough, would do this, is going to take action on that. So I think, policies and practices are great, but what can every individual start doing, to start creating those inclusive environments? And I think it starts by asking, by giving permission, I think is the other one as leaders. I remember during the pandemic, I would switch off at 5:00 and my office was the dining table. And I wanted to cook for myself. I had like 10 COVID goals, and one of it was I'm going to make my own meals. And so I would switch off at 5. I'd do my exercise, cook my own meal, and then, do whatever to relax. But I told my entire leadership team that, hey, I'm going to switch off at 5. I'm not going to look at emails. If it's really important, send me a WhatsApp. Otherwise, I'm going to look at it in the morning. And I think that indirectly gives permission to the rest of the team to also stop at whatever time suits them. So I think leading by example and modeling those behaviors, I think, are important.
Yes, very true. I feel like it needs to come from the leaders themselves to have that awareness, to be able to lead and create that psychological safety space for the team members to also follow suit.
So thank you, Shan Wen. It was great to have you on the show. I know you did this great program on mentorship. So I do want to leave the audience with some good takeaways because I think, mentorship and sponsorship, super critical for any woman that's progressing in the workplace. And a lot of women out there are afraid to ask because they think like, oh, I don't want to inconvenience this person that I really look up to, that I think I can learn from. So sometimes they might send a message that says, will you be my mentor? Which actually is a wrong starting point, especially if you don't know the person. And I've received quite a number of those messages, and it does put me in an awkward position. And so I do want to break down for anyone listening, a formula on how to get mentorship. And the first thing is be clear about your ask and who you want to ask it from. You don't need to understand your long-term plan for your career. You just need to know what you need right now and what help you need. And then once you figure out who are those people to help you, do you know them, or do you need someone to introduce you to them? And then is to write to them and just say, I've always admired what you do in this space. I'd love to get 30 minutes, no more, of your time to get your advice specifically about this question. And I think we all forget that we are all human beings, and human beings want to help other human beings. And the worst answer you're going to get is, sorry, I can't give you the time, but let me recommend somebody else that you can talk to. So I do encourage a lot of women to do that ask and take that step to seek mentorship. Once you got that meeting, what most people fall through on is the follow-up. There is no follow-up after that coffee meeting. So sending a message that says, thank you for your time. This one advice that you gave me, here's what I did about it. Because that's going to make that mentor feel really good that they helped you. And a lot of times people don't do the follow-up message. And it doesn't have to be immediate. Immediate one is, thank you for your time. I look forward to implementing some of your ideas. But, it could be 2 months, 3 months, it doesn't matter. But when you did something and used that advice, so you might have given that advice to somebody else, go back to that mentor, that person, and say, here's what happened. So that follow-up, I think, is the most important step. And then you might have another question a month down the road. Go back to that same person and say, I followed up. I have another question I'd love to brainstorm with you. Could you give me 30 minutes? That evolves to be a mentorship relationship versus the starting point of, will you be my mentor, which can be quite awkward if you put that upon someone who don't know you.
Thank you so much, Uma. I truly agree. It should be the mentee's initiative to come up with plan, to think about what are the areas they want to improve, and the queries they want to find an answer from the mentor. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no one was ever successful on their own. So we all need each other. We all need to help each other. So thank you, Shan. It was great to have you come on to the show, and I can't wait to hear what my co-host has to say about the questions you asked today. My co-host for this segment is someone I bumped into while waiting for a taxi after an event that was focused on a dialogue with women leaders across Singapore. A quick exchange of WhatsApp led to a lunch, a dinner, and now here. I'm constantly blown away by relationships you can strike up after a micro moment of meeting. Fatim Jumaboy is here with me today, and she knows what it takes to rise to the top as a woman in business. She's the managing partner of Herbert Smith Freehills, dual qualified in UK and Singapore, dealing with the complex and challenging areas of employment law. She's worked in some interesting places, including Afghanistan and Sudan. During the early stages of Asia's #MeToo movement, Fatim regularly advised businesses on how to achieve sustained culture change, as well as managing their most sensitive and high-profile investigations. She relishes in building micro networks using a single common characteristic to bring together an otherwise diverse group of people and calls herself a bookworm. So Fatim, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited to have you chime in on this conversation I just had with Shan Wen.
How interesting was that?
Yeah, well, you were on the sidelines listening to it. What came up for you in the first part where she's talking about how women thrive?
I think that was really interesting for me, this kind of existential battle between thriving and surviving. And also the pressure we put on ourselves to thrive at all times, and not just in the workplace, but in all aspects of our lives. And this sort of idea that we've got to hit this perfect thriving moment where we're hitting it out the park on all things at all times. And that's a lot of pressure for women. Whereas actually what we see are people are really successful in lots of different ways, but there's a push and a pull and moments of highs and moments of lows and sort of navigating that, but seeing it as all part of the journey of thriving.
Yeah, I like that because, we do find ourselves in this prove it again cycle. Let me prove it, over and over again. And in the workplace, that dynamic is because, generally speaking, we look at men for potential, but we judge women based on performance, right? So we're always wanting to deliver. And I love what you say that it's not just at work. We want to deliver in all aspects of our life. How have you tried to navigate that and balance that with self-compassion?
I think that's right. It is about compassion, and being compassionate to yourself means recognizing that it's okay to be ambitious. It's okay to want, it's okay to push. And that sort of comes also in with the latter half of what Shan Wen was talking about in terms of investing in yourself. But it's also okay to not have done it in a particular way and to do it in your way. It's not easy. You are definitely judged by your last set of numbers, your last big matter, your whatever the metric is in your industry. And that constant need to improve and to prove yourself, I think puts a lot of pressure internally. For me, I've learned to sort of step back a little bit and maybe take it a little bit more lightheartedly in the sense that it's really important, of course, but it's not the be all and end all. And I loved what you said about making sure that when you do invest, it's not just about having your identity fully tied in with what you do. I think sometimes with successful women, that's a real challenge because everything that you do then becomes part of your identity. But there's a whole host of other things going on in life as well that still need tending to.
Yeah. And you had to start from scratch. When you moved from the UK here, you were following your husband with the family commitments. You came to Singapore, right? You left on a high. And then you almost had to rebuild that from zero. And talk about prove it again.
It's tough, and there's a huge amount of self-doubt that creeps in. Am I going to do it? Will I do it? How will I navigate this new place? Will this new place be able to absorb me in the way that I have now found my voice and my space? Because you find your comfort zone and you sort of learn who you are and how to express yourself. And now can I plug and play that into a whole new environment with a different culture, a different set of nuances? That was a challenge, I'll be honest with you. But I think women are really adaptable, actually. I think we've got that skill set innately within us, and we have to sort of lean into that discomfort. And that's when we really grow and blossom.
Yeah. What was the toughest moment for you when you moved here to Singapore and then trying to figure out the next steps as it relates to your career and then thinking about all the family commitments, etc., just trying to reestablish yourself because you were very well known, highly recognized, and then you're here with a community that you're just introducing yourself and trying to get people to remember your name.
See, the funniest experience I have, and I laugh about it now, but it was not funny at the time, it was devastating, was going to see a recruiter early on who basically said, I'm just not really sure where you'd fit into this landscape. You don't really seem to have any relevant skills or qualifications. And thinking to myself, my gosh, I've come off what was, as you say, a fairly successful career. I'd done some pretty big things. And now sort of essentially being told, not really sure you fit in here. And trying to make sure and it definitely took its toll on me. I'm not going to pretend it didn't. It wasn't that it just was water off a duck's back. I'd love that to be the case, but it wasn't. But being able to pick myself up again and say, no, that's just one person's view. They don't have to be right. I am going to make something of it. I don't yet know what that is. That was scary for me. I'm somebody who has a plan. I'm usually very, very organized. I know what I want to achieve and I'm striving towards something always. So not having a clear plan was difficult. But that was the task then for me to sit down and think, right, what is that plan going to be? And I'm going to have to be a little bit agile and flexible because I'm building a plan in an environment where I don't know the landscape. So maybe the first two things I try are not going to be right for me. And I'm going to have to not see that as failure. Just another milestone in a journey that will take me where I'm supposed to be eventually.
Yeah. Now, that is brutal feedback to hear from a recruiter, especially when you're trying to establish yourself. And I know that a lot of women take feedback very seriously. They take it to heart. And I like to do what I call a donkey exercise, which is unless you have heard the same feedback at least 3 times, it's not a donkey to pay attention to. Right? Because I remember my performance reviews. I go straight to areas of improvement. Don't even look at the strengths, right? To your point, we're so hard on ourselves. Actually, we are more resilient because of that, but we are very hard on ourselves because we find ourselves in this position that, oh, right, one mistake, or not good enough, or that thing that I did that's not right. Like, now I'm going to overcompensate for it. Do you have a hack that has worked well for you on getting you out of that potential spiral and just going back to, well, actually, no, I'm good. I'm just going to now take this next move?
It's hard because those conversations play over and over and over. And you're right, it can be a 10-page report with, 99% of it is glowing, and you'll pick up that one sentence, that one word and reference. My starting point is generally, I think people give feedback in good faith. And I always come to it with that assumption that actually this feedback is given to me in good faith. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to think about it and I'm going to consider whether or not and how it applies. So I assume it's meant well. But people have different views. People see things differently. And in fact, I've had this very recently where I got 2 pieces of feedback at the same time, one suggesting that I'm very fierce. It was a characterization of how I came across, very fierce. And the other saying, you need to lean in more. You need to be a bit more demanding. So 2 people seeing me in a very different way. So actually, the same thing with the feedback and opinions. They are opinions. Assume they're good. Take what can be useful and helpful, but it's perfectly okay. You have full permission to discard the rest.
Yeah.
Think about it. Use it. Use what works for you, but discard what doesn't. And I consciously now will say to myself, no, we're not thinking about this anymore. Taking the feedback. This is what we're doing with it. Done. We're not beating ourselves up. We're not role-playing this in our head over and over and over again. It's occupying no more mental space.
Yeah. I'm curious on the fierce comment. Do you think that comment would have been delivered to a man doing the same thing?
It's interesting. It was actually somebody who had actually had no actual interaction with. It was a perception of me. So yeah, I suspect not. I suspect perceptions of women can be much, much more critical, and particularly based on how people look and present. And I do present in a very professional fashion all the time. So you maybe don't see the softer side of me unless you're actually interacting with me. I'd hope to think that if you do, you see it. But look, again, I took that as feedback. I took that as it's important to know that I'm not going to have the chance to sit down and spend detailed amounts of time with everybody. So actually, sometimes the impressions are made in those fleeting moments. And then that obligation is on me to make sure I also portray the right kind of image that I want to be portrayed.
Oh, this is the gender judo that women have to play, the masculine, feminine piece. So that when we exercise masculine traits, we're not penalized for it. So we have to show up predominantly feminine and what society, others expect us to show up as.
But not too feminine, because then we're not leaning into our space.
Correct.
We're not owning our space. So we've got to really make sure it's feminine enough, but also masculine enough, but also feminine enough.
I know. It's a tightrope.
Absolutely.
Isn't it? Because it can be exhausting. So I'm just wondering if you had a light bulb moment or something that you've just built a muscle around on not expending so much energy on walking that tightrope.
I think you have to be comfortable with yourself. You have to be able to go to sleep at night and think, did I hold myself and conduct myself in a way that I'm okay with? It doesn't have to be perfect. Again, I don't think we should hold ourselves to those standards because not every interaction we're going to have is perfect. Not every day is going to be our best. But have I held myself with a large degree of integrity? Am I okay with the way I'm behaving? And if so, I'm okay. I'm going to go to sleep now. And if not, well, then I'm going to work on it. I'm not going to beat myself up about it, but I'm going to work on it. But I know I'm not going to please everybody. I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea. Not everybody is my cup of tea. There'll be certain clients that warm to my style more than others. Will I ever win that client that really enjoys that aggressive, super macho, masculine approach? No, I'm not going to win that client. So I'm not even going to try to move into that space. I need to work in a way that is going to be comfortable for me because I don't have the additional capacity to try and be somebody else on top of doing the day job and everything else that has to be done as well.
Yeah. We talked with Shan Wen about the importance of mentors, and I'm sure you've had quite a few in your career and also in life. And I'm sure a lot of women are coming up to you asking for your time as well. Now, what is a good ask? If you think about anyone, not just women, who have come up to you to ask you for advice that evolved to a mentoring relationship, what prompted you to say, yeah, you know what, I'm going to give my time to this one? Because we all have limited time. And there's many who would love to get our time. How do you choose? Like, when's that moment they go, yeah, absolutely, going to help you?
So I do get a lot of requests, and initially I was trying to respond to them and trying to give people, and it's not possible to do, and it wasn't really done with any genuine understanding either. So now what impresses me is when somebody who reaches out to me has really done a little bit of homework. Your ask of me is specific. It's not, can I have some just general life advice? Or the one I get is, how do you succeed in a career in law as a woman? I don't know what that means. I don't know what you mean by succeed. I don't know what kind of law you mean. I don't know what matters to you. That is an impossible question for me to answer. And it's probably not even useful for you to know what my view on that is. It's people who come with sort of really specific asks. I like that. That shows that they're thinking a little bit ahead, and their ask is for my time to help them to work through a problem. But they don't come with an empty sheet of paper. They've come having thought, this is what I'd like to do, and this is what I'm trying to do, and I'm trying to get here, and this is the roadblock I'm having. Do you have some advice of how I can untangle that bit? That's a good one, because actually I'm now invested in you and I want to see how that one untangles for you. And so that follow-up, even I'm curious, and a good mentee will then follow up and say, hey, thanks. Just as you said, I followed that through and this worked. Actually, that didn't work and it went really wrong. Do you have any other advice, or can I try something else? And we can brainstorm together. So it's those kind of really well thought out, considered requests that I think can lead into something more. The just generic request where you've probably cut and paste that same request to 20 women on LinkedIn.
Correct.
Is a little bit frustrating.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm totally with you. I think the clearer the ask, the better that we can even assess that, are we the right person to help you, or even direct you to somebody else who might be better off to help you. There's going to be, students out there who are studying law, women who've just started a career in law, someone who's navigating law in many different dimensions. It's a whole world that I don't even fathom to understand. But someone listening to this show today and watching you might say, oh, what could I fast track for myself based on the mistakes and learnings you've had? If you had a couple to share with all those women who are listening, what would you say? Invest in relationships. We are taught very much law school. The practice of law is very highbrow. It's academic. It's, very black letter law and with a commercial focus, of course. But, it's very sort of substantive. And we can go straight to the task and we can solve that client's complex problem and we can come out with a series of, fantastic solutions. But actually what brings people back is not whether or not you know the answer, because lots of people know the answer. It's whether or not I like you, whether or not I feel like I can sit across a room and tell you my most difficult problems and trust that you'll be able to work this journey with me. So it's investing in those relationships, not just being
excellent in what you do. That's sort of expected. And actually, some of the best lawyers are not the most technically brilliant. They're actually those that understand how people work and what people want from things. So I think if I could do it again, and it would be the same advice to myself and certainly to anybody else, is invest early on in building relationships. And don't just assume that where somebody is now is where they're going to be forever, right? Sometimes we look at people and think, well, there's no value in that relationship. Don't do it so calculatedly and so selfishly, because actually we don't know where people end up. And maybe they're not directly relevant, but they may be indirectly. But how you make people feel when they leave the room is something that lingers with them. And that's what will keep them coming back or make them say, no, thank you, I'm going to try someone else.
Yeah. A lot of women struggle with networking. So I want to help break it down for them in investing in relationships. So if you had to break down the steps for a woman, so let's say, she's 5-8 years into the practice, trying to establish herself, figuring things out, knows some people in the industry, but really needs to sharpen the saw around a stronger, more strategic network. How would she start? Where would she start? What would she do?
I think you have to think about what your strengths are. So I know I'm an introvert. I'm not naturally going to be great in a large group environment. The idea of a big networking event, it just doesn't appeal to me. I'll maybe talk to one or two people, and then, to be honest, I'm looking for when can I exit and leave. So play to your strengths. I know that I'm better in smaller groups, so I do my networking in smaller numbers. I will try and make personal connections and relationships, try and connect with people on a more personal level. Find that one thing that you have in common. People love to talk about themselves. It's human nature. So if we can find one moment of connection and we can have some soft conversation about whether it's about your children, whether it's about your sports or your travels, whatever it is, books are always a good one for me, whatever it is, build that, then you have a bit of a connection and you can build onto that. But do the networking in a way that is going to be authentic for you so that it's not a chore. Because if it's a chore, you go, you maybe sort of force yourself, and actually you leave. You've not done a great job. You've maybe not even left that great an impression. So you're going to have to build it. I find finding those sort of micro issues that you have in common and building a network of like-minded people. Being a connector is also a great way to build your network because people remember you for that. And so actually you get much more familiarity with a lot more people as a result of that. So I think you have to, there's not an easy answer to this one at all. And I know lots of women struggle with it, but I think it's you have to find your style. But you have to accept that this is a task you have to commit to as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that reminder because how powerful your network is dependent on how many people can you introduce to others, right? So if I just summarize to break it down for all those who are watching and listening to this, is first to figure out, who are those people in your ecosystem that you should be building relationships with. And sometimes it may not be the most obvious people. The second is to find common ground when you have that chance to meet them. And I think the follow-up, right? How do you do your follow-up after you meet someone?
Either WhatsApp or an email, or LinkedIn is a great platform, or other social media platforms, just to keep in connection. But I think probably the thing that works the most successfully, and it's not done strategically, it's actually done genuinely now, is that if I think of something that reminds me of that individual or something that's relevant to the conversation that we've had, to follow up and say, oh, I saw this and I thought of you, or I thought you might like this, and just building that sort of constant small communication. It just feels like there's a connection. And then if you want to build that into a more professional relationship and you want to have an ask, you can feel comfortable to do that. The worst is when you've met somebody and the next question is an ask from you, right? Yeah. People don't like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true. Very true. So think long term and start building those relationships and invest in them. I love it. Thank you, Fatim. It was so great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, and wonderful to hear Shan Wen's views as well. I thought that was a really interesting session.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you're hearing this message, you've listened to a new episode all the way to the end. And for that, I thank you for the generosity of your time. To wrap up, here are a few points from this episode. We talked about what's important for women to thrive in the workplace. And we talked with Shan Wen about the importance of having a circle, that peer-to-peer mentorship, the importance of thinking about your skills, soft and hard skills, and how you can be consciously inclusive. And as a person in the workplace, the steps that you can take to create that environment. And then you heard from my co-host Fatim today about the importance of investing in relationships, to be kind to yourself and have that compassion, because we are always paddling hard to prove ourselves. What else did you take away from this conversation? I'd love to hear what you think. So please follow, like, and leave a comment. I promise to read all of them. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with your friends. And if you'd like to be a guest on the show, check out the link to send in your details. See you soon.